What's up, adventurers? My name is Platinum Phoenix, and welcome back to Fossil Fighters Champions. Last time, we did a couple quests, one of which had very little information out about it. And this time, we're going to be exploring the rainbow by finally tackling the 5 pay-to-dig sites that opened up in the Rainbow Canyon at the start of the post-game. So, hello! Beyond this point on the pay-to-dig areas, we have 5 dig sites for the 5 elemental types. Oh, and be aware that certain masks make it impossible to obtain fossil rocks. The entry charge is 5,000 G, so which dig site would you like to enter? Well, we have the red, blue, green, yellow, and white canyons. So I think we'll start from the top and make our way down. Starting with the red. Thanks for using the pay-to-dig area. When you're done, just take the gondola up to the top. You'll pop out right here. Alright, pay-to-dig sites in Rainbow Canyon are actually unique in terms of pay-to-dig sites because of the fact that they are gondolas. And I actually really like that they made these pay-to-dig sites gondolas because we're in a canyon. It makes the most sense for these to be gondolas. And it's better than just being like a half circle like the Hot Spring Heights pay-to-dig site. But even more so, the Red Canyon is unique from the other canyons, and not just because they're all fire-type Vivisaurs here. It's actually because, if I pull up the map, you can see that the Red Canyon is actually thinner than the other canyons. So there's actually less space here to find fossil rocks if you are looking for them, meaning that the fossils and the Vivisaurs found here in the Red Canyon are actually the hardest ones to find out of all 5 of the pay-to-dig sites here. But speaking of the Vivisaurs, let's talk about them. Starting with Gorgo. And Gorgo is a pretty straightforward attacker. It has great attack stat of 83. It has good damaging skills, and it has a 50% scare skill, allowing it to really take away options from your opponents while it's hitting them in the face. The only downside to Gorgo is that it has bad support effects, but since it's an attack zone attacker, you don't really want it in the support zone anyway. But next up is Sopteryx, and Sopteryx is an amazing supportive Vivisaur. It has a 100% Gold Confuse skill, meaning that it can really do some damage just by having the opponents attack themselves and their allies. And it has Life Charge, which allows it to heal your Vivisaurs if the opponent does end up attacking you. Other than that, it has FP+, which allows you more options just because it gives you extra FP each turn. And it has good support effects, raising your attack zone Vivisaur's speed by 90%, making it very easy for your attack zone Vivisaur to dodge skills from your opponent. Other than that, it has abysmal stats, meaning that if it's hit, it probably dies, especially if it's anything neutral or super effective. But, like I said, you don't really have to worry about doing damage with Sopteryx because of the 100% Gold Confuse skill. But next up after Sopteryx is Zyno, and Zyno is unfortunately a pretty bad gimmick Vivisaur. Like other gimmick Vivisaurs in this game, it has a 100% crit rate, and that would be awesome if it didn't also have a 6 as an accuracy stat, meaning that it's going to basically not hit any of its moves. But if you really want to use Zyno, my biggest advice is that it relies very heavily on support, meaning that it really either relies on your support zone Vivisaurs lowering the speed of your opponent. If you can lower the opponent's speed by 100, it basically means that you will always hit them, making the accuracy of your Zyno irrelevant. Or if you can put them to sleep, they also drop to 0 speed, also meaning that you are basically guaranteed to hit them regardless of your accuracy, which basically allows you to have a 100% crit rate Venusaur without the downside of the terrible accuracy. But like I said, it relies very heavily on support, and it basically is your entire strategy if you are going for that. But moving on from Zyno is Psychan, and Psychan is a supportive Venusaur that really likes its statuses. And by that, I mean it has great support effects for raising defense, and then it could also have Rallying Cry, which allows it to remove statuses from your other Venusaurs, your negative statuses. And then it has a 70% Confuse skill and a 50% Excite skill to really annoy your opponent just by making them not be able to attack or not be able to rotate and really taking options away from your opponent. But finally, the last new Venusaur that can be found in the Red Canyon is Dimorph. And Dimorph is just simply another amazing support Venusaur. It has amazing support effects that lowers every stat of your opponent's attack zone Venusaur. It has very cheap skills, and one of them is even an enrage skill. And it has Super Quicken if you want to focus on raising the speed of your other Venusaurs rather than making it so that Enrage is hitting your opponent. And with Enrage and Super Quicken, it can basically guarantee that your Venusaurs are not being hit by lowering accuracy and raising speed. It's a very good combination. But the biggest thing I think that Dimorph has going for it is that it can super evolve into Dimorph Ace. And Dimorph Ace basically keeps all of the great things from Dimorph while also getting a better attack stat, meaning that it's not solely a support Venusaur anymore and can be actually pretty devastating as a support zone attacker as well. And I like using it for that purpose overall. But next up is the Blue Canyon with the Water Venusaurs. And this place should have been called the Poison Canyon with how much poison the Venusaurs here like to spread. Like Alio, who is a decent attacking Venusaur with multiple ways of dealing damage. Like I just said, it really likes its poison, having a 50% silver poison skill and a 100% gold poison skill, which is very nice. But it also has just very good attack and very high damaging skills, which just lets it deal damage normally with the added poison on top of that. But next up is Nestar, who is a support Venusaur that can deal good damage also using poison. It has 2 different silver poison skills, which allow it to actually deal damage, even though it is support Venusaurs with that stat spread. It also has great support effects and healing chorus, which is like Life Charge, except it heals 200 LP to the entire team, which is very good as a support. But next up is Elasmo, which ironically is the only one here that does not spread poison. Elasmo is a good support zone attacker with a decent attack stat of 72, 2 silver enrage skills, and Law of the Jungle like many other attacking Venusaurs, just so it can live longer. Other than that, it has good support effects that give plus 20 to attack and accuracy to your attack zone Venusaur. But it can also super evolve into Kaishin. And Kaishin has 2 big differences from Elasmo. Kaishin has strictly better stats than Elasmo, and it has higher but mixed support effects than Elasmo. Kind of think of like how Tricera had good support effects, and then Heracles had good support effects, but Heracles also has the negative support effects. It also just has a super cool design, and if I'm being honest, if this thing was introduced in the main story, there's a very high chance that I would have used Kaishin over Harpy if I had the chance. But moving on from Kaishin, next up is Onyx. And Onyx is not a 27-foot long rock snake, but instead it is honestly a fairly basic attacker that likes some statuses. It It has decent attack at 77. It has a silver excite and poison skill, which allows it to annoy your opponents by making sure that they can't rotate and do a little bit of extra damage. And it has elemental boost, which helps with a lot of fire types, which are actually going to be coming up from a certain fighter that really likes them in the post game. But moving on to the final water type found here, it's Brontoth. And Brontoth is a support Vivasaur that has just great damage dealing options. And if it wasn't obvious already, it is the 100% golden poison skill that it has, which honestly is just a good option in general. But other than that, it has good support effects and the Inflame skill, which allows it to boost up your attack zone Vivasaur or your other Vivasaur's attack even more if you don't want to rely on the poison strictly. And next up is the Green Canyon with the Air-type Vivasaur, starting with the M-Raptor. The M-Raptor is a great supportive Vivasaur with amazing support effects and Super Quicken to help boost up speed even more. And even though it has awful stats, it does have ways of actually dealing damage using its two different poison skills. But moving on from the M-Raptor, next up is Churus. And Churus is a decent support zone attacker. It has decent stats, but its main thing that it has going for it is that its support effects are the best thing to pair with the gimmick Vivasaurs like Zyno, because it lowers the attack zone Vivasaurs of your opponent's speed by 99%, which is critical for those gimmick Vivasaurs to actually be effective, and is one of the best uses for Churus possible. But moving on from Churus, next up is Terra. And Terra is a decent support zone Vivasaur that is outclassed. It has an 80% golden rage skill, it has a rotate skill, which is good, and it has good support effects, but it is almost strictly worse than the B-Terra, and we've had access to the B-Terra for a couple of episodes already, and it just has lower stats than the B-Terra, it has a worse rotate skill than the B-Terra, and it has worse support effects than the B-Terra. So honestly, if you wanted to use Terra, I would honestly just recommend the B-Terra since it's the same thing, but better. But moving on from Terra, next up is Paraloft. And Paraloft is an attacker that basically doesn't mind sitting anywhere. It has a decent attack stat of 72. It has a 50% in rage skill, which allows it to make it so that your opponents have a harder time hitting you. And it has decent support effects, allowing it to sit in the support zone if you don't want to use it as an attacker. It also has payback, which basically means that you can counter some skills, making it so even if the opponent hits you while they are in rage, that they sometimes will do no damage and will sometimes just hit themselves. But the final new Vivasaur that can be found in the Green Canyon is the V-Raptor. And the V-Raptor is solely focused on poisoning your opponent. It has a 50% silver poison skill and a 100% gold poison skill. And it really likes poisoning. It is basically the only way it can deal damage, but it can also use Inflame to help your other Vivasaurs deal damage if you don't feel like using the poison skills. But the biggest thing that the V-Raptor has going for it is that it can super evolve into the V-Ripper, which is an awesome name, by the way. But the V-Ripper is a much more competent attacking Vivasaur. It's basically a fairly strict upgrade in terms of stats from the V-Raptor, and it keeps all of the same skill effects, meaning that it keeps the Inflame and both of the poisoning skills. So while it is dealing good damage normally, it is still inflicting the poison statuses allowing it to deal even more damage, which is very good. But on top of that, it also gains mixed support effects rather than the good support effects Raptor has, which tanks the opponent's defense, which is also very good. But next up, after the Green Canyon, is the Yellow Canyon, which is the Wall of Earth-type Vivisaurs. Or, more specifically, the wall of things that really want to sit in your support zone. Starting with Pelto. And Pelto is a pretty good support zone Vivisaur. It has great support effects, lowering your opponent's attack zone Vivisaur's attack by 40%. And it has the Harden skill, and it can combine to make very defensive Vivisaurs using those two things. Other than that, it has auto counter in case it wants to make itself really defensive so it can deal damage back once it's hit. And it also has relatively cheap Excite and Sleep skills, making it really good at annoying your opponents. But another big thing that it has going for it is that it can super evolve into Xanath. And Xanath has some trade-offs that make it less of a supportive Vivisaur and much more of an active Vivisaur. It gets the boosted stats that many of the other super evolvers get, and it has higher costed skills that deal more damage. So it keeps its same skill effects, but since they are higher costed now, I would say that it's harder to justify using them just for the skills or just for the statuses. But since you are still doing some good damage with them, I say that the statuses are now a bonus rather than the main objective of using them. Other than that, it has higher but mixed support effects, making it slightly worse in the support zone. But moving on from Xanath, next up is Salto, which, if I'm being honest, is just worse Pelto. It has fairly low stats other than its life points. It has the Harden skill, like Pelto, and it has a 40% Scare skill, which allows it to take away some options from your opponent, which is nice. It also has positive but bad support effects, basically raising the speed of your attack zone, but not by very much, and being the worst stat to raise from your supportive Vivisaurs. It also, unlike Pelto, has no super evolver, meaning that it does not get better at any point. But moving on from Salto is Orano, and Orano is a decent all-around Vivisaur. It has decent attack at 70 and a 50% confuse skill for when you want to use it as an attacker. And if you want to have it sit in the support zone, it has decent support effects as well as the payback skill, allowing you to kind of negate some damage while dealing damage to your opponent. But my favorite thing about Orano is actually its animation. Like, just look at this thing move. It's so funny that it's just like dancing. But moving on from Orano is Arceus. And Arceus is a support Vivisaur that becomes an attacker in a pinch. It has great support effects. It has Super Inflame to raise the attack of your Vivisaurs by a lot, actually. And it is one of only 8 Vivisaurs in the game to have a Golden Sleep skill. Which, if you want a Golden Sleep skill, like I said, it's only one of 8 Vivisaurs in the game to have one. But the reason I said that it can become an attacker in a pinch is because of its Parting Blow ability, allowing it to get 2 times to its attack and accuracy stats when it's under 10% of its health. Basically, meaning that if it super inflames itself and is under 10% of its health, its attack stat goes to 190, which is insane and one of the highest attack stats you can get in the game. But moving on from Arceus, the last new Vivisaur that can be found here is Lexo. And Lexo is a support Vivisaur that focuses on fairly cheap skills with status effects. And what I mean by that is that it has a 50% poison skill, it has an 80% poison skill, and it has a 60% sleep skill. as well as a hardened skill if you want to go for the more defensive route rather than the status effect route. It also has positive but not super helpful support effects, kind of like how Salto had them. And last but not least is the White Canyon, or by the look of this wall, the Gray Canyon. And the White Canyon houses all of the neutral types of the pay to dig area, starting with Neo. And Neo is honestly a fairly basic attack zone Vivisaur. It has only decent attack at 70, and it has Law of the Jungle, like many other attack zone Vivisaurs have. And it also has two different Excite skills, which allow it to stop your opponents from rotating their Vivisaurs. But other than that, it really has nothing else going for it. So, next up is Orno. And Orno only has one thing going for it, and that is when it is in your support zone, it can basically guarantee that your attack zone Vivisaur lands their attack. And that is because it has great support effects. Other than that, it has low stats, terribly weak skills with no effect. So if you're using it as an attacker, it's not doing any damage. And it has a terrible parting blow ability that raises its attack and accuracy by 150% while lowering its defense and speed. So all in all, it's really only there to raise your attack zone Vivisaur's accuracy and nothing else. But moving on from Orno is Apato. And Apato is another really bland long-range Vivisaur. There's just a lot of Vivisaurs here in the White Canyon that are pretty bland. But Orano is fairly weak at only 64 attack. It has the 100% rotate skill that many other long-range Vivisaurs have had, but it doesn't really have the stats to back it up. And other than that, it has the sacrifice skill, which allows it to die in order to give up its LP for your other Vivisaurs, which might be its best use. But moving on, next up is the O-Raptor. And the O-Raptor is a Vivisaur that focuses on stealing your opponent's FP. It has very cheap skills that steal your opponent's FP, and because those skills are less FP costed than the FP that it is stealing, it actually helps to cast or to use your other Vivisaur's skills as well. And other than that, it also has Super Quicken to boost up speed and pretty decent support effects to go along with it. But it can also Super Evolve into the O-Raptor Fiend. And the O-Raptor Fiend is much more of an attacker than the original O-Raptor, because it has an amazing attack stat of 90 and very high damaging skills. But since its FP stealing skills don't steal as much FP as they cost anymore, I think of them more as a refund rather than a gaining of FP move. So when you are using these high damaging skills, you can think of it more like, instead of using this 400 FP cost skill, it's more like 290 or something like that. And that's a much better use of thinking about how his FP steal skills work. But other than that, it has gained absolutely awful support effects, meaning that it no longer wants to sit in the support zone. And if it does sit in the support zone, it really negatively affects your attack zone Vivisaur. But moving on to the final new Vivisaur that can be found in these dig sites, it is Guara. And Guara is another airborne Vivisaur that loves its effects. It has an effect on every single skill it has, being a 50% gold sleep skill, which is one of only 8 Vivisaurs that has. It has a 100% rotate skill, and it has the ability of going nuclear by giving up its LP in order to deal massive damage. And on top of all that, all of those skills that I just listed are very cheap to use, meaning that it can get these effects off for very little FP actually spent. It also has great support effect, having the defense and accuracy of your opponent's attack zone Vivisor, which is just great to do. I like to think of it as like a better souped up Jara, in a sense. But with that, that is all 30 Vivisors gone over in the 5 pay-to-dig areas. I know this was a lot of bios all in a row, but if there's anything I can say is that we don't have any more bios to go over for actually quite a while. So these are the last bios we are going to be going over for at least a couple of episodes. But with that, I think we're going to end this episode here. So I hope that everyone enjoyed watching this episode. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Next time, I think it's about time that we get back to the Calisteo Super Cup. But until then, happy adventuring.